And as I mentioned, today's webinar will be recorded. And so if you see something you like or see something you want to go back to, you will have a copy of it. Please check out our YouTube channel as well for any past webinars, customer education series as well. My name is Kim Tran again. Welcome. I will be passing it along to my colleague Rick Wilson today, Senior Product Manager here at Gimmal, to walk you through our new Gimmal legal hold solution, as well as a demo and Q&A for those joining us live. Thank you. And Rick, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Let's see if we can get screen sharing here, and hopefully you can see the deck correctly. So I think we're off and rolling. Thanks everybody for joining us. As Kim said, I am a product manager here at Gimmal. So full disclosure, I'm not an attorney, and I've tried to be as accurate as possible as we've prepared the slides for you today. So you may run into a few things that might be a little slightly inconsistent, but we've done our best to make sure that we're on legally firm ground, although I don't have those credentials. So let's think about the process that we'll be walking through today. We're going to talk a bit about what legal holds are. I know many of the folks on the call today may not be legal people, so we're going to do some just high level, what is a legal hold and how does it work? Who's responsible for it? Talk a little bit about some of the consequences if you don't do the process well or you don't do the process at all. And then some challenges before we roll into the actual product itself, how it works, and some of the criteria. So at a high level, those are the things that we'll be talking about. Certainly happy to address your questions at the end. We have the chat panel being monitored, so we'll make sure if any of you have questions from the material or as we go forward that we pick those up for the end of the session. So let's do a little definition work, and apologize to the legal folks on the audience who all this is redundant for. But for those of you who are not familiar with legal holds, just some vocabulary, some process kinds of notes about what legal hold is. Now, holds exist in two different capacities or spheres inside the legal environment. There is one aspect of the legal hold process that has to do with custodian notification. And we're going to spend a lot of time on custodian notification today. And then the corollary to that, after you've notified your custodians and enacted the hold, is preservation of content, which is extremely important. We'll talk about some of the reasons that that's important moving forward. But just be aware of the fact that there is notification, there's preservation. We'll talk a bit about both, but we're going to focus heavily on notification because that's really what we're going to show you today. Although there is some preservation aspects to our software, and we'll make sure that we cover those for you as well. And I know we had some questions early on about those. So what happens from a workflow standpoint with regards to legal hold, especially from the custodian notification standpoint? Now, typically that occurs when a plaintiff files a suit against a defendant, as you see up at the top of the bar. So we've been notified that there's been an action filed against our organization. Important thing to remember, especially if you don't come from a legal background, is that's not the only criteria for initiating a legal hold process. In all actuality, even if you suspect that there might be a dispute on the horizon, you should start early and enact your legal hold process. For example, maybe you read a news article that one of your main clients is being investigated for financial impropriety. That should ring a bell in the back of your mind that says, this is a prime client of ours. If there's something going on with regards to their financial performance or some question about how they're handling their books, we may be pulled into that lawsuit. So we may have some responsibility to be participating in that. And that might be, for example, an outside process that triggers a legal hold workflow. So filing a suit, suspicion that something may occur are all good places to start. And the way that typically would happen inside an organization is somebody initiates what's called a matter. So this is the first vocabulary word I wanted to cover, just to make sure everybody is familiar with these terms as we roll through the demonstration especially. And matters, for those of you that aren't in the legal world, is the way that the legal team keeps track of the different projects that they're working on. So typically there would be a client. If you're in-house, of course, you're the client. And then there would be a matter for each one of those projects that you work on. And you'll see as we go through the process here that we create matters inside the software. That's why I wanted to make sure we covered that. So the next step is your counsel, inside, outside, whoever's managing your legal process, maybe it's a paralegal in your organization, is going to associate with that matter a set of custodians. So this is a second term that we wanted to key in on. And in this context, custodians are the responsible employees inside your organization who own the information. It's Rick's mailbox, it's Kim's OneDrive account, it's the network file share that the accounting team writes to. Those would all be examples of custodians, Rick, Kim, the accounting team, that might be part of that custodian hold notification. So create the matter, associate the custodians, appropriate custodians with that matter, then create the actual hold notification itself. So the hold notification is where all of the instructions are going to be provided for those custodians, alerting them that they're on hold, specifying how often that hold is going to send reminders. I'll show you all this as we go through the process. In conjunction with that, there's typically some language that says that custodian has a duty to preserve electronic or physical content. This is key. This is why we're actually sending the notification to alert these custodians to their responsibility. As I said, we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that electronically in the software, but sometimes it's outside of the scope of what we can do in the software, and that would really be physical content. Do they have paper files? Do they have thumb drives? Do they have other types of documentation that may not be electronic that is going to be relevant or potentially relevant that needs to be preserved? So we don't want to rush to the shredder in the file room so that people are going to start getting rid of documents out of their desktop. We want to avoid that at all costs. So sending the hold notification or creating a hold notification gives us the opportunity to sort of cast that preservation requirement, if you will, in the notice. Finally, we get down to actually the notification where we send that hold notice to our custodians. And then the final step in the process is once the custodians receive that notification, there's a mechanism for them to do acknowledgement. So that would kind of be the high level legal hold process. Now, there are a lot of nuances to this. For example, oftentimes there's a questionnaire that needs to be sent to the custodians along with notification that's going to solicit feedback from them. Did you have contact with party A or party B between these dates? Do you have other types of documentation related to the case? What types of communication mechanism did you use with the client, text or Slack or chat or Teams and so forth? So this isn't a comprehensive view of legal hold, but it's a good grounding point. It's a place to start our discussion from today, certainly. Okay, so thinking a little bit about this, obviously the legal team inside your organization is the main party that's going to be responsible for creating, administering, and managing these holds. But don't be a victim of tunnel vision as you start to think about that, especially if you're that person in the organization. You do have a large part in managing the legal hold process, but you're certainly not an island. You're probably going to need to rely on your information governance or IT department to help you enact those preservation capabilities. So we need to make sure that content's not being removed from a file share or preservation, it's being preserved in the user's mailbox or wherever those content repositories are. You're also probably going to want, if your organization's big enough, to have a compliance and or risk management organization. You're probably going to want to alert those folks, because what happens is now, as we enact preservation, that content begins to be saved. And now we've sort of paused any kind of disposition process that's taking place automatically on that content. That's going to have impacts for both the risk management and the compliance teams, because now there's a bunch of content that maybe should have been disposed of according to their processes that isn't going to be disposed of because of the requirement for legal hold, especially because legal holds are not necessarily very transient activities. They may go on for months or in some cases years. So this content that may ordinarily have been disposed of that your risk team or your compliance team might be monitoring might be hanging around a lot longer than they would feel comfortable doing that. But you don't have a lot of say in that particular matter. We've got to preserve that content. And the reason that we need to preserve that content is there's some really serious consequences that can occur if we don't. Now, this slide is talking about that from the standpoint of financial sanctions. And there's a number of examples in case law where this has occurred. But this particular one that was cited in the slide here, this Klipsich group, was an intellectual property suit that was filed against ePro, I'm sorry, by ePro against Klipsich. And as part of that e-discovery process, it was discovered that some of the executive team inside the defendant organization were destroying content in a process called spoliation. And we probably should have talked about a bit about that on the introduction slide, but spoliation is the willful destruction of content. Spoliation is looked on very dimly by the courts and the judges, resulting in a number of potential sanctions that might occur. So, for example, the judge might throw out specific pieces of information, make them not available to a jury as a result of spoliation. They could, in fact, dismiss the whole action because the content wasn't handled correctly. In this particular case, there was a pretty severe financial penalty. So it was estimated that this suit probably could have been settled for about $20,000. As a result of the fact that this spoliation occurred and potential incriminating content was destroyed by one of the parties, the judge imposed a $2.7 million sanction against that party. Severe financial penalty. So it's important that you've got a legal hold notification process in place. Think about it ahead of time so that you can effectively implement it and be prepared to avoid this kind of an outcome if you end up in a situation where you do have some legal challenge to your organization. There are a number of pieces of software that you can choose from to implement legal holds. We are by no means the only way to do that. Some of them are very comprehensive. Ours is very entry level from the standpoint of being easy to use and providing all of the information that you need to be able to effectively manage the process in a defensible fashion. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But what you need to be aware of is you should have a legal hold solution available, and there should be a way that you can document and implement that process in a very rapid period of time. Now, some of the things to think about as you're evaluating those solutions. A lot of the organizations that provide legal hold software are larger organizations that deal through a partner community. So in that situation, although their software may be fine and it may address your needs and your use case, you not only have to evaluate the software, you've got to evaluate the partner community, because that's really who you'll be working with, the partner that's delivering that functionality to you. Is it an organization you feel comfortable working with? Do they have a track record? Are they able to help support you in a timely fashion if you run into a problem while using the software? So think about how the software is going to be delivered and implemented in your organization. If you're in a situation where you have a lot of matters and a lot of custodians, you probably need a more robust litigation hold solution to accommodate the use case that you have there. Just be aware of the fact that with that sophistication in terms of the kinds of things that the litigation hold package provides, there's a price tag associated with that. And in many cases, those can be very costly. Some of them require fees based upon volume of data that you're preserving or is involved with the litigation. We've opted for a very easy to understand fixed price model for our software because we think that's a lot easier for customers to budget and manage as we move forward. A corollary to that is often those legal hold solutions, the more robust ones, are associated with a full e-discovery suite. So you may need to implement a full set of functionality in order to obtain the litigation hold capability. Not necessarily a problem, especially if you're a larger organization with a very sophisticated requirement. But if you're coming from an environment where you're trying to manage this process today with spreadsheets or Microsoft Outlook, and you just want a more defensible way to approach that moving forward, You may not need a full e-discovery suite and the associated cost with that size product in order to be able to accommodate that. And actually, I think we should probably flip these last two items on the slide, because the larger solutions tend to be more complex, provide a great deal of functionality and a lot of options. They take a much longer time to implement. Very often that means a steep training curve for your team. It means more investment in time and resources from a financial standpoint in order to prepare for it. And it means it's a little more difficult for you to quickly become productive with a solution moving forward. So as we thought about some of those challenges when we designed our legal hold solution, we tried to focus in on three key areas. We wanted to make sure that what we provided our clients was defensible. We wanted to make sure it was reliable, and we wanted to make sure it was efficient. From a defensible standpoint, now you have a way to electronically track and associate your custodians with a matter, deliver notifications to them electronically, keep track of the fact that they've acknowledged those notifications, and be able to effectively provide a judge or opposing counsel with that information if it comes into challenge. That's really going to help you avoid some of the risks associated with not doing the process correctly or overlooking it. One of the things people don't think about often is, and I mentioned this earlier, these holds can be ongoing for quite a period of time. Because that's the case, you very often need to remind your custodians on a recurring basis that the hold is still in effect, they still have a duty to preserve, and so forth. Well, if you're trying to do that by tracking with spreadsheets and sending Outlook emails, it's really difficult to remember that you have to send those reminders on a frequency basis. We've automated that process in our software, so those reminders would go out on some specified frequency that you provide when you create the legal hold. So you don't have to necessarily be keyed into the fact that, geez, it's the end of a quarter. I need to make sure I send reminders to everybody who's on litigation hold. Oh, is this custodian rolled off hold? This custodian still on hold? It can get a little bit difficult to manage from a spreadsheet point of view in that situation. Because our software is cloud-based, we think it's very reliable. You know, you've got a stable, consistent platform that's working the same every single time. As I mentioned, your notifications are going to go out on a frequency basis automatically without necessarily being involved with them from an administrative point of view. And to the point I talked about earlier, we're delivering the software, we've developed the software, we support the software. So in the situation where you may have a question, or perhaps you've encountered an issue with the software that needs to be resolved, you're dealing directly with the author of the product, and we can pull our engineering team in a rapid fashion to help address a problem if you happen to encounter one. And then finally, from an efficiency point of view, I mentioned the fact that the larger solutions, although they're comprehensive and have a lot of features to select from, and they provide a lot of capabilities to the clients who opt to use those, that comes at a price with regards to complexity. So our solution, you'll see it's, we believe, very easy to use, excuse me, can be quickly implemented. In most cases, our customers are up and productive with legal holds within a day. It's very simple to turn on. And in a lot of cases, they don't even need to do anything from a software point of view inside their firewall. Everything's managed from the cloud. There are a few exceptions to that we can talk about later for more sophisticated functionality, but it is possible to have a fully cloud implemented solution that can be up and running in a matter of hours, really. Okay, so let's talk about the process. Now, this is specific to Gimmal software and the way that our legal hold process works. As I mentioned early in the presentation, oftentimes the workflow process begins with creating a matter. And in fact, that's how it works inside of our software. You'll see this in the demonstration. Your legal hold administrators would create a matter. And as part of that matter, they're going to specify the custodians who might be associated with the matter. Once that matter is in place, and you could think of that as a container, a way to organize your work moving forward. That's really how matters are utilized inside the software. Moving forward, then, we would define the metadata associated with the hold. Give the hold a name, specify your reminder frequencies, some of that kind of information, the start date. You probably wouldn't know the close date. We track that, but it's very often not available to you as initial information as you create the hold. From there, you would move on to a series of screens where you can define the criteria for the hold itself. And I'll show you these in the demo, but there's an area where you can specify the hold information, the notification text, the senders and so forth associated with the hold. There's a tab where you can specify a similar set of information when that hold is closed or when it ends. Oftentimes you want to provide your custodians with a workflow process or a set of steps that they need to take when the hold ends. There's an acknowledgement tab where you can set up information that's provided to the custodian after they acknowledge to let them know that you in fact have received that and they've done their part, if you will. And then the reminder functionality itself. And then finally, from the standpoint of actually creating the hold, there's a place where you can associate custodials or non-custodial sources with the hold. Now, I mentioned the fact that when you create the matter, you can associate custodians. But this step in the process is where we say which custodians are effectively going to be notified, because you may have a situation where you've got custodians who are on the matter who are not going to be notified for whatever reason. Sometimes that happens because that custodian is very high up in the organization and you don't want to nag them with reminder messages and so forth. Sometimes it's because even though it's a custodian, it's somebody who's no longer an employee. So you may have content for them. For example, maybe you still have their mailbox and there may be information in their mailbox that's relevant to this particular investigation or litigation. So they are a custodian, but we're not going to notify them because they don't work for us anymore. And there's no mechanism to be able to do that from the software point of view. So that's what this step is all about, selecting which custodians from the matter are going to be part of the notice itself. That creates the hold notice, all of the information or content, if you will, that's associated with the hold. And then that final step would be administering the notifications itself. So triggering the email notification to the custodian to alert them to the fact that the hold is in effect, track their acknowledgement electronically through that same process and so forth. So very simple, very straightforward workflow process. Doesn't necessarily give you the most comprehensive set of options that all the products in the market do, but it's very easy to implement, it's very affordable, and it's very effective. Okay, in addition to the legal hold situation, the notification itself, there are a number of other things that we just wanted to mention. It can be done through the same software product. It can be used to manage your electronic content through classification and tagging. We can apply remediation rules to content, for example, mailbox retention rules or file retention rules. It can help you analyze content for e-discovery if you need to do that. Not a requirement for using our legal hold, but we do make it available if you need to be able to search and collect content as part of your initial information gathering for that matter. And we've got some file analysis components that'll let you look at information for perhaps sensitive data or identify information that might be client confidential and so forth, and be able to track that and administer it moving forward. So all of these additional capabilities are part of Gimmal Discover, where the legal hold solution lives, but none of them need to be implemented in order to use just the hold functionality that we've talked about. And then finally, I know a number of you are interested in what can be done with regards to preserving or holding content inside the solution. So from the capabilities that are available in Gimmal Discover today, we've got integration points with Microsoft 365 for Exchange, email, for Microsoft OneDrive, and for SharePoint. So from our product, if you wish to trigger the preservation, you can do that inside of Gimmal Discover and have it pass the information to Microsoft 365 to say, place this mailbox on litigation hold, or implement a preservation hold in OneDrive or in a SharePoint site. At the moment, that's the extent of the preservation that we do. Now, there is some with our e-discovery component. There is some ability to cache information or make a copy of it as you perform an e-discovery search. some people treat that as a preservation, but it's not a truly hold in place the way we do with 365. So we're relying on Microsoft's capability to lock that content. For example, if you put a mailbox on litigation hold in Microsoft 365 and a custodian start to delete email, all of that email they try to delete is going to be preserved and maintained in a parallel folder inside the mailbox. So it never really disappears from the environment, and it's available to the e-discovery team as they move forward. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the introductory comments. Wanted to take a few minutes and walk through a high-level demo to kind of give you a background on what the legal hold process looks like inside of Gimmal Discover. And then we'll come back and address any questions that you might have. So I'm going to flip over to a login screen for Gimmal Discover at this point. I'm logging in with a designated user account. You see user ID and password is being passed into the cloud for verification. We do support single sign-on for those of you who may need SSO. Now, my login has full administrative rights, so you see all of the functionality across the top bar is available to me because I've got a full administrator account. If you're a customer that only needs legal hold, hey, that's fine. We'll just turn all this functionality off. These icons you see at the top for governance or classification, they'll be there, but they'll be grayed out and inactive, and you can move right into legal hold to be able to begin to configure and manage your legal hold process. As we wait to that come up, you're going to find we provide an initial screen in the legal hold module where you get just sort of a landing page, if you will, to give you some high-level information about what's active in your hold environment. So how many matters are you tracking today? How many holds are currently active and so forth. And then over here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is where you can initiate your matters, create the holds themselves. And then we've got a feature called a master custodian lists, which is a place where you can go to see which custodians are associated with particular matters, which custodians are associated with particular holds, and so forth. Just a nice way to kind of keep track of them. So let me show you quickly from a matter point of view what matters look like. And they're fairly straightforward. There's not a lot of information that's required in order to create the matter. Remember, as I talked about, this is a container or a way to manage information moving forward inside the process. And they're used in both full e-discovery and litigation hold. So we're really going to acquire three pieces of information when we create this matter. So the first one would be some demographic content about the matter, give it a name, maybe select a type. We've got some specific different types that you can associate with the matter. We'll provide a matter number for you. If you use a matter management system that creates matter numbers on its own, you can provide your own number here as well and associate it. You have the opportunity to associate an owner. So this would be somebody who has access to the legal hold product, or maybe the entire Gimmal Discover environment that is managing this particular content. Status open closed. Of course, this is an open and a new matter and the date it was opened. We can associate a set of custodians. You can see here there's a number of custodians that I've pulled in. And if I go to the add button here, there's a panel where I can pull in custodians either at the user level or at the group level. Now today we can obtain custodians in two different ways. Custodian information can be entered directly into the application when you start to use Gimmal Discover. So you could, if you've only got a handful of custodians, that's great. You can just type that information in and build your custodian list so that those are available to pull into matters. If you have a larger environment with more employees, you might opt to integrate with Active Directory, which we can do. And in that environment, we can pull in lists of individual users or groups or both from your Active Directory as potential custodians. And that gives us the ability to build this list of potential custodians moving forward. So we pull in the custodians relevant to this particular matter. And then this final option, this shared user option, this designates who in your team has access to the information relevant to this matter. You may not want everybody who has access to Gimmal Discover to have access to this matter information. For example, if your IT team is working with you and they're the ones that are going to be managing governance or some other functionality in the application, they may have no need to see information relevant to a matter. So you can wall them off. We also see clients who use this for outside counsel. So if you've got an outside counsel partner who's helping you with this litigation, and maybe you want to give them access to the legal hold notices so they can see them and see who's acknowledged them from a custodian point of view, you can add them into the application, and then you can designate that they're one of the shared users who's allowed to see the information relevant to this matter. That's really all there is to creating a matter. Once those are in place, they stay active until you close them, so they're perpetual from that point of view. And then you can move on to the hold itself. Now, before we start into building an actual hold, there are two building block components that you often may want to build in advance of creating your first hold. And you see here under this More button, those are notification templates. Think of this as the boilerplate text that you may want to define for your hold notification. Very often there's a base notification, so you can put all that text in and have it ready to go. And then as you create a new hold, you can pull that in as starter information. So this hold notification template gives you the ability to build and create that boilerplate text. And then the second piece of sort of building block content that you can create to associate with your holds is a custodian questionnaire. And you could think of this as a Survey Monkey type functionality where we can define a question, we can characterize the type of question that is, fill in the blank, multiple choice, open text, and it's required, and so forth. So you can build those questionnaire formats, templates, if you will, for your custodians and have them available as a component that you can pull into the hold as you create it. So I wanted to make sure we covered those before we went into an actual hold itself. So let me just open one of these up so you can see what the hold looks like. If you'll recall, when I walked through the workflow process, I talked about different elements of the hold notice, the metadata, the hold notice, the close notice, the acknowledgement. So here's how those bubble up or manifest in the user interface. So we begin with creating just the metadata information about the hold. What's the name of the hold? There's an open text field if you want to provide a description just for internal purposes. Associate it with the matter, and you can have multiple hold notices per matter. That's entirely permissible. There are some reminder notices that you see available coming up in the next section of the screen here. One of those is for acknowledgement. So if I send a custodian a notification, they don't acknowledgement within 1 day, 7 days, 14 days, whatever period you deem a requirement, then you can automatically have them prompted or reminded through email that they have a pending acknowledgement that needs to be acted upon. The second is the ongoing hold reminder. So I talked about the fact that these holds may go on for an extended period of time, and you may want to remind your custodians periodically, quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever it might be, that they're under hold and have a duty to preserve. So we can specify that automatically here and have those reminder notices get generated on their own. Moving on to the second tab here, we've got the ability to pull in or manage our hold notification templates. So this is where you have the ability to select a predefined template. You can also type your own text down below here. In most cases, I think clients would opt to have a predefined template that they'd want to send to the custodians to provide that information. You can specify the email parameters for the mail that's generated to your custodian. Who should it appear that it came from? Maybe you don't have a general counsel. Maybe it should be, the administrative department. Maybe it should be the name of your outside counsel, if that's appropriate. Or maybe you want to CC or BCC your outside counsel to let them know that these hold notices were sent out. So you have the ability to do that as part of this configuration. You can attach a file to the custodian hold notice. Very often we see something like maybe an employee handbook section. Maybe there's a PDF that details what your responsibilities as an employee who's been notified of legal hold entail. And you want to pass that standard operating procedure document along as part of the hold. So you could attach that PDF to the hold itself. A subject line for the email that's going to be sent to your custodians, and then of course the actual text for the hold itself. based upon the template that you've selected. You'll notice off to the right here, there are some token buttons. Token buttons allow you to predefine a piece of information to be included in the hold. So maybe the name of the matter or the name of the hold itself or the date that it was created. You may want to have that text automatically provided. So you can see here the matter name is going to be passed along as part of this information to my custodian. A preview tab that will let you see what the custodian notice is going to look like. Similarly, this close hold notice tab is a very similar set of information to provide your custodian when the hold is completed. If there are any other steps that you wish for them to take or information that you want to provide to your custodians, you can specify that. As I mentioned, when a custodian gets a hold electronically, there'll be a button to click in that email to say, I've acknowledged a receipt of this hold notification. That updates the database, so we automatically know that has occurred, and it will trigger the sending of this notification text to alert the custodian that we have in fact recognized the fact they've acknowledged their hold. So that's what this is about. And then that final tab that I talked about where you have the opportunity to look at custodians on the matter and decide which of those are going to be part of the notification process. That then creates the hold package. So now you've got the hold all formatted and ready to send to your custodians. And there is a tracking screen inside of Gimmal Discover that allows you to do that. So from this view inside the environment, we can trigger notification to our custodians. So we could select one or more of our custodians here. We can say send notification to that person. If for some reason one of them opts out of the matter or they're no longer valid, we could close the hold notice for that particular person, close them out of hold notification. You can also use the columns in the grid to track your hold. Is the hold open or closed? When was it sent? When did we notify our custodian? When did the custodian accept that notification or acknowledge it? And in fact, have they completed their custodian questionnaire? And there's a hyperlink here that would allow us to see how they answered the questions that were provided to them on the questionnaire. So those are the basics. You can see it's very simple to sort of understand how this works, get the building blocks in place, be able to manage your notifications electronically, track them, make sure they're being sent, acknowledged, and reminded on a periodic basis. And as I said, one other thing just to touch on the custodian notification or the custodian master list, this will provide me information. So a custodian calls you and says, I'm confused. I don't know which matters I'm still active on or which matters I'm part of or which holds I'm active on and so forth. This gives you a very quick place to go in and take a look at that person and see which holds they might be part of or which matters they might be part of. Okay, that concludes what we had prepared for the demo today. Kim, I don't know if we have any questions that we need to answer.
Rick, yes. So we did have a couple pre-submitted questions. And I believe we have two people wondering the same thing. And so we can move on to the next slide for Q&A.
Oh, okay, great. So I think we talked a little bit about this during the course of the demonstration or the slide deck for sure. So yes, we do support Microsoft 365 holds for mailbox content, Microsoft OneDrive, and Microsoft SharePoint. And we would enable the functionality that's already inherent in 365 in that context.
Yes, and then follow up to that, Jim in the chat asked how does this differ from M365 Purview eDiscovery?
Yeah, Jim, it does not differ. So all we're providing is a gateway to that functionality. So in some situations, you may not want an administrative person who's managing a hold to have to navigate the Microsoft environment to be able to trigger those holds. Sometimes it can be a little confusing and complex. So we're just providing an alternative to that in our user interface where they can go in and say, place this mailbox on litigation hold or this OneDrive account on litigation hold.
Great, and then thank you. And then Barbara asked, does your solution include, this word always trips me up, Ephemeral
Yeah.
messaging applications like Teams.
All right, Barbara, we do not have support for that today. In our full discovery, we can search Teams content or certain portions of Teams content, but we are not doing any of the other ephemeral products. I know, for example, a lot of clients ask about Slack or maybe WhatsApp or some other types of solutions. We do, however, work with a partner who allows us to be able to get to information like that. A partner organization named Cloud9 is very experienced with working with some of those. Sometimes we call them modern content sources. So if there was a requirement to do that, we could certainly help hook you up with the Cloud9 folks.
Great. And then I believe there was another question, and then we have another question live.
Yeah,
Is there an in-place
touched on this.
preservation aspect to this tool?
Yeah, Jay. So we pretty much touched on this. Yes, there is. It's through the Microsoft, or it's in conjunction with, I should say, the Microsoft 365 capability that we've talked about. Yeah.
Great. And then Jennifer Long just asked, do you integrate with any matter management systems?
Yeah, great question, Jennifer. It's integration. I should recharacterize this, not integration, but import from those systems is on our roadmap, and we hope to have it by the end of the year. Because there's such a wide variety of those, we think the approach that we're going to take is to create some sort of an import format so that our clients that are using disparate systems can export content about custodians and matters and so forth into a format that we've predefined. Could be CSV, could be XML. I don't know what that is yet because we haven't fully scoped it, and then allow us to be able to import that for you into the application to sort of jumpstart you, if you will.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick. Every time we co-host one of these webinars or chats or discussions, I'm always learning so much from you. So thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge. Well, everyone, this concludes our webinar today. It is so great to see familiar names and new names, but it is also really awesome to get to see you all in person. Last year, we were at various events across 2023. And our next slew of trade shows and conferences coming up in April, starting with AIM. If you are going to AIM, please reach out to your customer success manager if you are a Gimmal customer. And we are hosting an exclusive customer party. And so Kurt, who is VP of Gimmal Physical, and David Quackenbush will be on site attending AIM, and we would love to see you all in person and host you. We will also be sponsoring a couple of conferences, some of them in kind of a boomerang sponsorship. We haven't seen some of you folks in a really long time, so excited for that. InfoNext, a brand new partnership between MER and ARMA, as some of you may know, happening in California from April 8 to 9. I will personally see you there as I will be attending live with some colleagues. ARMA, we will see you for the one-day spring conference there. My colleague Mac will be in attendance, answering any questions about the Gimmal product suite. And then, of course, ARMA Houston. As some of you know, we are headquartered in Houston, our hometown, and it's always great to see you all there. And then Laserfish and Power in ARMA Canada, we will be heading out there end of April, going into May. So please stay in touch at gimmal.com/events. We host customers education series as well if you are interested in more specific feature functions across the Gimmal solutions. And then, of course, a series of educational webinars that we will be hosting all throughout the year. And so thank you again for joining us live. Thank you, Rick, for today's webinar and demo. And we will see you all around the block. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Kim.